Millionaire finds pregnant homeless woman sleeping at a bus stop, but is shocked by the ring on her finger. The rain that night wasn't just water falling from the sky. It felt biblical, a heavy, gray curtain washing the city without mercy. The gutters overflowed, mixing mud, oil, and the trash no one bothered to collect. And there, amidst that desolate scene, huddled on the cold metal bench of a transit shelter, was Juliana. At 24, life should have been just starting, full of color and promise. But for Juliana, the world had turned black and white long ago. 7 months pregnant, she tried to cover her bulging belly with a frayed coat, 2 sizes too big, which she'd found in a dumpster days earlier. The biting cold cut through the holes in the fabric, making her bones ache, but the pain in her soul was deeper. Months ago, she had a roof, she had a bed, she had what she thought was love. But the man who swore to protect her was the same one who destroyed her self-esteem, drained her savings, and isolated her from everyone she knew. When the first physical assault threatened not only her but the baby growing inside her, Juliana fled. She left without looking back, penniless, undocumented, carrying only the clothes on her back and the fear that was now her sole constant companion. That night, hunger twisted her stomach. The baby kicked, restless, perhaps sensing its mother's distress. Juliana closed her eyes, trying to sleep. Sleep there wasn't rest. It was an escape. It was the only time she didn't have to be alert against the violence of the streets, against the looks of disdain, against the shame of having become invisible. To those passing by in their cars, she was just a shadow, an obstacle in the urban landscape. Across town, reality was brutally different, yet not necessarily happier. Ethan, a 32-year-old tech mogul, adjusted the silk tie in the rearview mirror of his armored SUV. His bespoke Italian suit cost more than an average family needed to live comfortably for a year. He was the CEO of the moment, the technology genius, the man who turned code into fortunes. He was heading to the launch of his empire's new headquarters, a glass and steel skyscraper designed to scrape the sky. But inside, Ethan carried a deafening silence. 5 years. It had been 5 years since his life lost its color. A stupid fight over life choices, shouted words, slamming doors, and the disappearance of his younger sister. Since then, he had accumulated millions, bought mansions, traveled the world, but nothing filled the empty chair at the Sunday dinner table. Guilt was a guest that never left, reminding him every day that he had failed in his most important mission, to be the protective older brother. It was then that fate, which enjoys playing tricks, intervened. The luxury vehicle, the ultimate symbol of his security and control, simply died. The digital dashboard flickered and went dark. The engine silenced. Ethan, incredulous, tried to start it. Nothing. The rain hammered down on the vehicle's roof. He called his insurance, his private mechanic, anyone who could fix it. The response was a cold reality check. Mr. Thorne, with this storm and the gridlock traffic, the tow truck will take at least 2 hours. Repairs, maybe 8. Ethan checked his watch. He was due to give his keynote speech shortly. He couldn't be late. Impatience, a dominant trait, won out. He consulted his phone's GPS. He was only 2 miles from the event. A walk that, on a normal day, would be unthinkable for someone in his position, but now seemed the only logical solution. "I'll walk," he muttered to himself, opening the door and feeling the wind soak his face. He locked the car and started walking, protecting himself as best he could with a flimsy black umbrella. His expensive leather shoes splashed in the puddles. With every step, his irritation grew. How could this happen today of all days? He thought, cursing the city council, the car manufacturer, and the rain. The walk was harder than he expected. The wind turned the umbrella inside out. The water soaked the cuffs of his trousers. He needed momentary shelter to fix his clothes and catch his breath before the final stretch. He spotted the flickering light of a broken lamp post illuminating a deserted bus stop. Ethan sprinted for the concrete cover. He shook the umbrella violently, irritated, splashing water everywhere. That's when he realized he wasn't alone. The smell hit him first. A smell of wet cloth, of the street, of forgotten humanity. He wrinkled his nose, an automatic reflex of someone who lives in sanitized, air-conditioned environments. He looked to the side and saw the body huddled on the bench. A woman. By the way she was protecting herself, she appeared to be pregnant. Ethan's irritation subsided slightly, replaced by a moral discomfort. He had everything. She had nothing. The rich man's protocol of charity prevailed. He would pull some bills from his wallet, wake the woman, give her the cash, and tell her to find a shelter. That way, he would feel better about himself, and she would leave, freeing up the space. He approached. The woman was shivering, even in sleep. Her hair was dirty and matted, hiding part of her face. Ethan reached out to touch her shoulder and wake her. "Ma'am," he called, his voice firm but not aggressive. "You can't stay out here in this cold." As he extended his hand, the dim post light fell upon the woman's hand, resting on her large belly. And at that moment, time stopped for Ethan. The world around him silenced. The rain seemed to have gone mute. On the ring finger of that dirty, calloused hand, an object shone that did not belong in that scene of misery. A golden ring. It wasn't just any ring. It had a very specific design. Two intertwined gold strands forming the infinity symbol, with a small, discreet emerald at the center. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He felt the blood freeze in his veins. With a trembling hand, he raised his own left hand. On his pinky finger, there was the exact match to that ring. They were family jewels, commissioned by their grandparents. "One for you, Ethan, to keep you grounded. One for you, Jules, to give you courage. As long as you wear this, you are never alone," their grandmother used to say. Couldn't be. The chances were zero. It must have been stolen. She must have found it, but the way the ring fit her finger, the sign of wear, said otherwise. Irritation gave way to pure desperation. Ethan forgot the suit, forgot the inauguration, forgot who he was. He grabbed the woman's shoulder urgently, shaking her. "Hey, wake up!" he yelled. His voice choked. Juliana awoke with a jolt, her eyes wide with panic. Street instinct made her recoil, shrinking against the back of the bench, protecting her stomach with her arms. "Don't hurt me. Please, I don't have anything," she pleaded, her voice hoarse from sleep and fear. "Look at me," Ethan demanded, dropping to his knees on the wet floor of the bus stop, uncaring about the mud staining his tailored trousers. "Look at me, Juliana." Hearing her name, Juliana's body locked up. That timbre of voice, that authority mixed with an ancient affection. She strained her eyes through tears and the rain. The man in front of her was soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead, but his eyes, they were the same eyes that looked at her with disapproval and love when they were kids. She saw the ring on his hand. Then she looked at his face. "Ethan?" she whispered, as if seeing a ghost. "It's me, Jules. It's me." The barriers Juliana had built over the last few months, the stone walls that kept her alive and insensitive to endure the pain, crumbled in a second. She let out a sob that seemed to come from the depths of her soul and lunged forward. Ethan caught her, hugging his sister with desperate strength. He didn't smell the damp clothing. He didn't feel the dirt. He only felt that she was too thin, too fragile, too shaky. "Forgive me, Ethan. I ruined everything. I had nowhere to go," she cried compulsively, staining his impeccable suit with tears and grime. "Shoo, it's over. It's over. Do you hear me?" Ethan held her face between his hands, kissing her feverish forehead. "I looked everywhere for you. I should never have let you leave that house. Never." They stayed there for a few minutes, two castaways reuniting in the middle of the storm. People driving past saw only a rich man embracing a street person, failing to understand that the greatest rescue of that man's life was unfolding there. But reality returned. The transit bus, the same one Juliana waited for just to watch pass and dream of a destination, rounded the corner, illuminating them with its powerful headlights. Ethan stood up and helped Juliana to her feet. She could barely support herself. "Where are we going?" she asked, dizzy. "We're going home. But first I have one thing to do. And you're coming with me." "Ethan, look at me. I can't go anywhere looking like this." Ethan looked at his sister. He saw the rags, the hole-ridden shoes, the sadness in her eyes, and he felt a deep rage at the world and at himself. He took off his $1,000 blazer and placed it over her shoulders. "You are my sister. You go where I go." The bus stopped. The driver looked suspicious. Ethan, with the authority of someone who commands empires, signaled for Juliana to board. He didn't have exact change for the fare, so he pulled a high-denomination bill from his wallet and shoved it into the fare box, ignoring the astonished look of the driver and the few passengers. The trip was short, but it felt like an eternity. Juliana huddled in the seat, Ethan holding her hand like an anchor. He called his company driver, ordering him to wait at the event entrance with a wheelchair and a discreet medical team on standby. When they arrived at the inauguration venue, the rain had lessened to a fine drizzle. The press was all there. Photographers, partners, investors, the city's elite with their champagne flutes. Brooke, Ethan's fiancée and chief financial officer, paced back and forth, furious about his delay. Suddenly, the buzz stopped. All eyes turned to the entrance. Ethan walked in. Without his blazer, his white shirt wet and streaked with mud, his trousers ruined. And by his side, supported by his steady arm, was Juliana, a pregnant homeless woman wearing the CEO's jacket. The silence was absolute. The shock was palpable. Brooke let her glass drop, shattering on the floor. Ethan didn't stop to give anyone explanations in the lobby. He walked straight to the stage. He helped Juliana up the steps with a care no one had ever seen him exhibit for anything or anyone. He seated her in a chair reserved for a local politician. He took the microphone. The feedback briefly squealed. "Good evening." Ethan's voice boomed, deep and laden with emotion. He didn't look like the usual cold businessman. He looked like a man who had just survived a war. "You came here to see the inauguration of a company. You came to celebrate success, profit, the future." He looked at Juliana, who kept her head down, ashamed. Ethan crouched, took her hand, and pulled her up to stand beside him. He raised her hand for everyone to see, showing the dirty ring on his sister's finger, shining under the spotlights. "For 5 years, I built all this trying to fill a hole. I thought success was this: tall buildings, money in the bank, respect. But I was wrong. My greatest failure was sleeping at a bus stop 2 miles from here, while I was deciding which vintage wine to serve you all." The audience was hypnotized. No one blinked. "This is Juliana, my sister, the true owner of all this. Because everything I built was in the hope of one day being able to give her the world she deserved. Today, this company is not mine. It is hers. It is my nephew's, who will be born soon. And if anyone here has a problem with her appearance, her scent, or her past, the door is right there. This is her company now." There was a moment of tension, and then someone started to applaud. Then another. They were tentative, confused claps, but soon they became a standing ovation. Not for the business, but for the raw truth of that moment. Ethan didn't wait for congratulations. As soon as he stepped off the stage, he wrapped Juliana in his arms again and guided her to the emergency exit, where a company car, a different one now, was waiting. "Let's go home, Jules. The show is over. Now it's real life." In the car, the heater blasting and the soft leather of the seat felt lick. A distant dream to Juliana. She rested her head on her brother's shoulder and, for the first time in months, allowed herself to close her eyes without fear of not waking up. Ethan looked out the window, watching the city pass. He knew the gesture on the stage had been beautiful, but he also knew that the real battle was just beginning. Trauma isn't healed by speeches. The gutter leaves marks that silk doesn't easily erase. They were together again. The ring had kept its promise. But, looking in the rearview mirror, Ethan had the strange feeling that the storm outside might have passed. But a new, perhaps more dangerous and silent storm was brewing within his own social circle. He squeezed his sister's hand. Whatever came, they would face it. Or at least, that's what he believed on that night of euphoria and rescue. Have you ever felt like life gave you a second chance just when you thought all was lost? Ethan and Juliana's story shows us that family love can be stronger than pride and time. But we also know that happiness rarely lasts long, and the peace of the wealthy often makes the bitter restless. Now that Juliana is out of the streets and inside the mansion, have the problems ended, or have they just changed address? Envy sleeps light and wakes early. What would you do in Ethan's place? Would you have the courage to expose your personal life like that? Or would you try to solve everything in secret? And if you were Juliana, could you trust again? Leave your opinion here in the comments. I want to know what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like the video to follow the continuation of this thrilling story. The storm has just begun. The arrival at the mansion was not the fairy tale that movies usually show. When the iron gates opened and the car glided down the limestone drive, Juliana didn't feel immediate relief. What she felt was the crushing weight of the difference between their worlds. Ethan's house was immense, silent, and cold, a monument to the solitude he had cultivated over the past few years. For a woman who had spent months sleeping with one eye open and one closed, alert to every sound on the sidewalk, that marble silence was deafening. Ethan led her to the guest suite, a space larger than any house Juliana had ever lived in. There were linen sheets, down pillows, and a bathroom with endless hot water. But on that first night, Juliana couldn't sleep in the bed. The mattress felt too soft, as if it would swallow her whole. Ethan found her in the middle of the night, huddled on the plush rug at the foot of the bed, hugging her knees. "The bed is too high," she whispered, embarrassed, when he turned on the light. "I'm afraid of falling." That broke Ethan's heart into even smaller pieces. He didn't insist. He simply grabbed a blanket, sat on the floor beside her, leaning against the wall, and stayed there, watching over his sister's sleep until the sun rose. He realized that money could buy the bed, but it couldn't buy rest. The recovery would be slow, one day at a time. In the days that followed, the house's routine turned upside down. The mansion, previously frequented only by silent staff and suited associates, began to receive doctors, nutritionists, and therapists. Juliana was anemic, dehydrated, and her blood pressure was dangerously high. The high-risk pregnancy demanded rest and care she had never received. Ethan, the man who timed meetings down to the second, learned patience. He canceled international trips and started working from home, setting up his office in the library to always be nearby. Little by little, Juliana's distrust gave way to a grateful shyness. She began to eat without the veracity of someone who doesn't know when their next meal will be. Color returned to her face, and a spark, though faint, returned to her eyes. Conversations on the balcony at the end of the afternoon became their refuge. Juliana recounted, through tears and long pauses, the abusive relationship, how her ex-partner had isolated her from her family, telling her Ethan hated her, that no one would miss her. She told him of the shame of returning home defeated, which led her to choose the street over humiliation. Ethan listened, swallowing his own bitterness, feeling a corrosive guilt for not having noticed the signs sooner. In return, he stripped away his CEO armor. He told her how wealth had not brought happiness, how every conquest was hollow without someone to share it with. "I bought a yacht last year," he said, laughing without humor. "I never used it. It just sat at the dock. I thought that if I owned beautiful things, the sadness would go away. But sadness knows how to swim, Jules." It was during one of those late afternoons that Juliana felt the baby kick hard and took her brother's hand, placing it on her belly. Ethan's eyes widened. That small movement beneath his palm was more impactful than closing a multimillion-dollar deal. Right there, he understood that he wasn't just saving his sister. He was saving the family's future. He promised himself that this nephew would never know what it was like to be cold or afraid. The house began to come alive. Juliana, feeling stronger, started giving her input on the decor, replacing the gray vases with colorful flowers. She took an interest in the company's social projects, wanting to understand how she could help other women who had been left behind, in the gutters. Ethan saw in her a sharp intelligence that the hard life hadn't managed to extinguish. The peak of this new phase happened about 2 months after the rescue. Ethan organized an intimate dinner, just for the two of them. On the table, there were no exaggerated luxuries, just their favorite childhood comfort food, beef stroganoff. At the end of the meal, Ethan handed Juliana a leather folder. "What is this?" she asked, wiping her mouth with the napkin. "This is your freedom," Ethan replied seriously. "These are the papers that transfer a portion of the company's shares into your name and create a trust fund for the baby. It's not a gift, Juliana. It's what is rightfully yours. I don't want you to depend on me, or any man, ever again in your life." Juliana cried, but this time it was a cry of relief. They toasted with sparkling cider, sealing a silent pact. The ring on our finger shone under the crystal chandelier, and the matching one on Ethan's finger responded to the glow. It seemed the worst was over. It seemed that happiness was, finally, a permanent resident in that house. But the happiness of others, unfortunately, often feels like an insult to those who live in bitterness. Brooke, Ethan's fiancée, watched everything from a distance, with a fake smile plastered on her face and hatred boiling in her veins. Since the night of the inauguration, when she was publicly humiliated, she felt power slipping through her fingers. Juliana's presence wasn't just a family inconvenience. It was a direct financial threat. Brooke saw her inheritance, her status, and her control over Ethan disappearing day by day. She tried, at first, to be friendly. She brought gifts for the baby, praised Juliana's recovery, but her eyes were cold as ice. Ethan, intoxicated by the joy of having his sister back and focused on her recovery, didn't notice the nuances. He thought Brooke was accepting the new reality. Big mistake. Brooke knew she couldn't attack Juliana directly. Ethan would defend her like a lion. She needed to make Ethan give up on Juliana. She needed to plant the seed of doubt. The discord had to sprout from within. First, she started with subtle comments. "Sweetheart, don't you think it's strange she stayed on the street so long without asking for help?" Brooke said while massaging Ethan's shoulders. "The streets change people. Addictions, bad company. Did she really tell you everything?" Ethan rebutted, defending his sister, but the question echoed in his mind during silent moments. Seeing that words were not enough, Brooke decided to act. She hired a private investigator to dig through Juliana's past. She wanted dirt. She wanted crimes, drugs, anything. But the report came back clean. Juliana had only been a victim of circumstance and domestic violence. Furious, Brooke crumpled the report and threw it into the fireplace. "If a crime doesn't exist," she thought, watching the paper burn, "we create one." The plan was executed with surgical precision. Brooke took advantage of an afternoon when Juliana had gone to a doctor's appointment and Ethan was on an important video conference. She entered the guest suite, wearing gloves to leave no fingerprints. She hid, deep inside Juliana's underwear drawer, a small package containing illicit substances and a wad of cash. Then, she accessed Ethan's computer and, using her CFO credentials, forged small bank transfers from his personal account to an unknown account, erasing the digital trail to make it look like an amateur job. That evening, the atmosphere in the house was light. Ethan joked about possible names for his nephew. That's when his phone pinged, a security notification from the bank. "What is it?" Juliana asked, noticing the change in her brother's expression. "Nothing. A strange movement in my account." Ethan frowned. "Must be a system error." "Let me see, darling." Brooke approached solicitously. She looked at the screen and feigned astonishment. "Ethan, that destination account. I saw a paper with that number in Juliana's room earlier, when I dropped off fresh towels." The air in the room froze. Ethan looked at Brooke, then at Juliana. What are you talking about?" Juliana asked, confused, her hand on her belly. "Let's clear this up right now," Brooke said with a voice of false concern. "It must be a mistake, but why don't we look in the room, just for peace of mind?" Ethan went upstairs, his heart pounding erratically. He wanted to believe his sister, but the fear of betrayal, the trauma of having been abandoned in the past, clouded his judgment. He entered Juliana's room and began opening the drawers. "Ethan, what are you doing?" "Stop it," Juliana pleaded, standing in the doorway, feeling a sharp pain in her abdomen. When Ethan pulled out the false bottom of the drawer and found the packet and the money, the world stopped for the second time. But now it wasn't magic. It was horror. He held the packet, looking at Juliana with an expression of pain and disbelief that cut through her soul deeper than any knife. You brought this into my house? Ethan's voice trembled. I gave you everything, Juliana. I gave you my life, my trust. And you're stealing from me? Are you still using this? No, Ethan, that's not mine. I've never seen that. Juliana screamed, desperation taking over. Someone put that there. She's lying. Brooke, leaning against the doorframe, sighed theatrically. Oh, Juliana, just admit it. We can pay for a rehab clinic. You don't have to lie. Addiction is a sad disease. It's a lie. She's lying. Ethan, believe me. Juliana moved to grab her brother's arm, but he recoiled. That step backward was the end. Ethan didn't yell. He didn't kick her out. He did something worse. He remained silent, looking at the evidence in his hand, unable to look her in the eyes. Doubt was etched on his face. The businessman, accustomed to dealing with facts and evidence, was fighting the brother who wanted to have faith. And, in that moment of weakness, cold logic won. I need to think, Ethan said quietly, turning his back. Juliana, please, stay in the room. We'll decide what to do tomorrow. Juliana felt the ground disappear. The pain of betrayal, of seeing her brother, her hero, her protector, doubt her integrity because of a cheap setup, was unbearable. She felt the practice contractions get stronger, fueled by the absurd stress. She wasn't going to stay there to be judged. She wasn't going to be the addicted sister who needed to be institutionalized. The pride, the very thing that had kept her alive on the streets, roared within her. In the early hours of that morning, a storm descended upon the city, echoing the night they reunited. While the house slept, Ethan tormented in his office, Brooke smiling in her room, Juliana grabbed an old backpack. She packed only one change of clothes. She paused at the vanity. She took the golden ring off her finger, the symbol of the promise that they would never be alone. She kissed the jewelry, her tears wetting the cold metal, and left it on the note she had written with a trembling hand. She opened the ground floor window and slipped out to the rain. The wind howled, and the darkness of the night swallowed her again. She was alone, penniless, homeless, and now, with her heart more broken than before, because she knew what it was to have a home and lose it. In the morning, Ethan entered the room with swollen eyes, ready to apologize for his suspicion, ready to listen to his sister. But he found only the made bed and the ring shining solitarily on the paper. He read the note. Money buys the bed, Ethan, but it doesn't buy trust. I loved you more than anything, but I can't stay where I'm viewed as a problem to be solved. Take care. The ring stays because you broke the promise first. Ethan fell to his knees, the scream of agony trapped in his throat, while outside, somewhere in that merciless city, Juliana walked through the rain, feeling real labor pains begin, far from any hospital, far from any help, alone against the world once more. Life has a cruel way of testing us, doesn't it? Just when we think the sun has finally come out, the storm arrives and extinguishes the light. Juliana chose the dignity of the streets over the distrust inside the mansion, and Ethan, blinded by the evidence planted by envy, made the mistake that could cost the lives of his sister and his nephew. Now, I ask you, looking into your eyes, would you forgive such distrust coming from the one you love most? Or would you do like Juliana and leave even pregnant and with nothing? Was her decision courage or madness? The situation is critical. The baby is about to be born on the street, and Ethan is alone with the ring and his regret. Will he discover Brooke's setup in time? Or will it be too late to save them both? Write the word injustice in the comments if you think Brooke deserves to pay dearly for what she did. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because the next part will bring the conclusion of this story, and I guarantee you're going to need a tissue. Until the next installment, the silence that followed Juliana's departure was not one of peace, but of death. The mansion, with its square footage of marble and artwork, now seemed like a mausoleum. Ethan remained on his knees, gripping the golden ring so tightly that the metal marked his palm. The farewell letter was wet with his tears, the blurred ink turning the words of pain into incomprehensible stains. But the crying soon gave way to something different. An analytical coldness, the same one he used to destroy competitors in the market. Ethan's mind, now free from the momentary fog of rage, began to process the facts. Juliana had access to credit cards with no limit. She had shares in her name worth millions. Why, in God's name, would she steal petty cash and hide cheap drugs in an underwear drawer? It made no logical sense. It made no financial sense. And, most importantly, it didn't align with the woman who preferred to sleep in the rain rather than beg. He stood up, wiping his face with the back of his hand. Sadness converted to suspicion. Suspicion turned into controlled fury. Ethan walked to the central office of the house, where the security system servers were located. Brooke, in her arrogance, believed she knew technology as well as he did. She had said the cameras in the bedroom hallway were under maintenance that afternoon. A system glitch, she had claimed. Ethan sat in the leather chair, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He wasn't just a CEO, he was a software engineer. Brooke might have disabled the main recording, but she didn't know about the cloud backup, a redundancy system Ethan had personally installed years ago, paranoid about the safety of his missing sister. He accessed the files from the previous afternoon. The video loaded. The image was clear. There was Brooke. There was no maintenance. There was just her, looking around the empty hallway, putting on thin surgical gloves. She entered Juliana's room. She stayed inside for 3 minutes. She came out empty-handed, but with a smile of satisfaction that made Ethan's stomach turn. Afterward, she went to his office, sat at his computer, and made the bank transfers. The truth hit him like a physical punch. It wasn't Juliana who betrayed him. It was he who betrayed Juliana by believing the woman who slept in his bed. The evidence was a farce, and he, the great discerning businessman, had fallen for it like an amateur. Ethan didn't wait for dawn. He marched to the master bedroom where Brooke slept the sleep of the just, or rather the unpunished. He turned on the main light, ignoring the soft bedside lamp. Brooke woke up groaning, shielding her eyes from the sudden brightness. "Ethan? What's wrong?" "It's 3 in the morning." He didn't shout. He just threw the tablet onto the bed. The video paused on her face wearing the gloves. "You have 10 minutes, Ethan said, his voice so low and dangerous that the hairs on Brooke's arms stood up. "What is this?" She tried to feign innocence, picking up the device. When she saw the image, the color drained from her face. "Honey, I can explain. I was just checking if everything was clean." 10 minutes? Ethan repeated, looking at his wristwatch. "To pack your things and get out of my house. If in 10 minutes you are still here, I will call the police and submit this recording as evidence of fraud, invasion of privacy, and slander. And tomorrow, my lawyers will be at the company to formalize your termination for cause and the revocation of all your holdings. You leave here with nothing, exactly as you wanted my sister to leave." Brooke tried to argue, tried to cry, tried to appeal to their years of relationship. But she met a wall of ice. Ethan no longer saw her. He only saw time passing, time he was losing while Juliana was out there in the storm. When the gate closed behind the taxi that carried Brooke away, Ethan was already on the phone. He woke his head of security, hired 3 private investigation firms, and put his entire fleet on the street. "I want every hospital, every shelter, every health clinic checked. She is high-risk pregnant. She is without documents and without money. Find my sister or no one will have a job tomorrow morning," he ordered, getting into his car. The rain continued relentlessly, washing the city and hiding her tracks, and drove aimlessly, guided only by desperation. He drove past bus stops, slowing down, searching for the familiar shadow. Every huddled woman, every hooded person made his heart race. But the city was immense, a concrete labyrinth that seemed determined to swallow Juliana again. It was close to 6 in the morning when the phone rang. It was one of the investigators. "Mr. Thorne, we found a check-in record at the Northside Municipal Hospital ER. An unidentified woman, In advanced labor, arrived 40 minutes ago. The characteristics match. Ethan didn't reply. He just floored the accelerator. The armored car tore through the flooded streets, ignoring red lights and speed cameras. The fine didn't matter. The car didn't matter. Only she mattered. The municipal hospital was a scene of war. Gurneys in the corridors, people crying, exhausted doctors rushing around. The smell of ether mixed with sweat and cheap disinfectant hit Ethan as soon as the automatic doors opened. He, in his wet designer clothes and distraught face, looked like an alien in that environment. "Where is she?" he asked at the reception desk, his voice shaking. The pregnant woman who arrived without ID. The receptionist, accustomed to daily tragedies, looked at him wearily. "Are you family, sir? I'm her brother. I'm all she has. Corridor 3, pre-labor room. But her condition is delicate, sir. Her blood pressure is very high." Ethan ran. He pushed doors, dodged nurses, until he found the room. And there she was. Juliana lay on a narrow bed, covered by a rough hospital sheet. She was pale, sweating coldly, connected to monitors that beeped rhythmically. She moaned in pain, her eyes squeezed shut. She was alone. Ethan felt his legs give way. Guilt hit him like a physical wave. He approached slowly, afraid of breaking her even more. "Jules," he whispered. Juliana opened her eyes. They were red, swollen. When she saw him, there was no smile. There was fear. She tried to recoil in the bed, an instinctive movement of protection. "No," she said, her voice weak. "I didn't take anything, Ethan. I swear." That phrase was the final stab to his heart. In her moment of greatest pain, she was still trying to defend herself against an unjust accusation. Ethan held her hand. It was ice cold. He kissed his sister's fingers, wetting them with his tears. I know, my love. I saw the video. I know it was Brooke. Please forgive me. For God's sake. Forgive me for doubting you for even a second. I'm an idiot. I failed you again." Juliana looked at him, seeing the brutal sincerity on her brother's face. The businessman's armor had completely vanished. There was only the scared boy who had lost his little sister. A strong contraction hit her, making her scream and squeeze his hand. "It hurts so much, Ethan. I'm scared. I'm here. I'm not leaving. Never again." The doctors rushed in. The baby's heart rate was dropping. It was time. There was no time for transfers, for private hospitals, for luxuries. The heir to that fortune would be born right there, in the midst of the raw reality of the majority of the population, assisted by doctors who worked out of love and vocation, not for money. Ethan, who fainted at the sight of blood in movies, didn't let go of Juliana's hand for an instant. He wiped the sweat from her forehead, whispered words of encouragement, promised the world, promised the moon, promised to be better. "Push, Mom. One more time," the obstetrician shouted. With a final cry that mixed pain and liberation, a baby's wail echoed through the tiled room. A strong, vibrant sound, full of life. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, placing the small, still messy and crying being on Juliana's chest. Time stopped again. Juliana looked at her son, touching his soft skin with reverence. Ethan looked at the two of them and felt that, for the first time in his life, he was truly rich. That baby didn't know his uncle was a millionaire, didn't know his mother had been homeless. He only knew he was safe in her arms. The recovery in the following days took place in the hospital. Ethan refused to transfer her immediately, respecting the fragility of the postpartum period. He slept in a hard plastic chair beside the bed, refusing the comfort of his empty house. It was there, between the beeping monitors and the smell of hospital soup, that the true reconciliation happened. "I brought something," Ethan said on the morning of her discharge. He pulled the golden ring from his pocket, the symbol of infinity. Juliana looked at the jewelry, then at her brother. "I can't go back to that house if I'm going to be a guest, Ethan. If I'm going to be the poor little sister charity case." "You won't be back as a guest," Ethan replied firmly. "Brooke is no longer in our lives. The CFO position is vacant. I know you don't have the degree, but you have the intelligence and life experience that no MBA teaches. You will study, you will prepare, and you will take your place. And as for the house is ours. We are partners. If I ever doubt you again, you have the right to kick me out, not the other way around. Juliana took the ring. She slid it back onto her finger, where the tan line was still visible. Partners, she agreed. And his name will be Michael, after Grandpa. Michael, Ethan smiled, testing the name. Michael the warrior. It fits. They left the hospital not as a savior and a victim, but as a family. The storm had passed, and the sun outside, though timid, lit the way back home. Epilogue. 18 months passed. The mansion garden, once a green, sterile lawn forbidden to be walked on, was now unrecognizable. There were toys scattered across the grass, a tricycle tipped near the fountain, and the unmistakable sound of children's laughter. Michael, now a robust 1.5-year-old boy, ran with his clumsy steps after a ball under Ethan's watchful eye. The doting uncle was sitting on the grass, suitless, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, his hair tousled by the wind. On the veranda, Juliana watched the scene with a tablet in her lap. She no longer wore rags, but she also didn't dress like a frivolous socialite. She wore the elegant, practical clothes of a businesswoman. She was reviewing the numbers for the Phoenix Initiative, the foundation she had created and chaired. In recent months, the foundation had pulled over 200 women off the streets, offering not just shelter, but professional training, therapy, and dignity. The project wasn't charity. It was human investment. Juliana used her own story to inspire and to shape the company's policies. She had become a powerful voice in the city, respected not for her brother's last name, but for her own strength. Brooke had tried, months earlier, to sue Ethan for emotional distress. The lawsuit was dropped when the evidence of her fraud became public. Today, gossip had it she was working in a small, far-flung town, far from the luxuries she coveted. Justice sometimes is slow, but when it arrives in the right hands, it is relentless. "Mommy!" Michael shouted, pointing at a butterfly. Juliana put down the tablet and descended the steps to the garden. Ethan stood up, picking up his nephew and spinning him in the air. "He has your stubbornness?" Ethan teased, handing the child to his mother. "And your charm for getting what he wants," Juliana retorted, kissing her son's cheek. Ethan looked at his sister. She was radiant. The shadows of the abuse and the cold nights on the pavement still existed in her memories, of course. Trauma doesn't magically disappear. There were hard days when the fear returned. But they had learned they didn't have to face those days alone. He raised his left hand, the sunlight hitting the ring on his pinky finger. Juliana did the same with the hand holding Michael. The two rings shone in unison. Their grandparents' promise, which had seemed just a family legend, proved true in the most painful and beautiful way possible. They got lost, they broke, they almost destroyed each other, but the bond that united them, forged in blood and tempered by forgiveness, was unbreakable. Ethan hugged his sister and nephew, closing his eyes and deeply inhaling the smell of cut grass and new life. He finally understood. True fortune was not in the banks or the glass buildings. True fortune was having a place to return to and having someone to hold your hand when the storm arrived. And there, in that garden bathed in the afternoon sun, they knew that no matter what the future brought, they would never, ever be truly alone. And so ends the journey of Ethan and Juliana, a story that began in the mud and ended in love, proving that forgiveness is the most powerful tool for rebuilding that exists. Often, we judge those on the street without knowing the story behind that tired gaze. And often, within our rich and secure homes, we live in emotional poverty that no money can cure. Did this story touch your heart? Do you know someone who needs a second chance or who needs to forgive a sibling, a parent, a friend? Life is too short to live isolated in our own mansions of pride. Comment the word family below if you believe true love overcomes any barrier. And tell me, what did you think of Brooke's ending? Was it fair? Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story in your family group chat. Who knows, maybe it's the message someone needs to hear today. Big hug, and until the next story.